So Capture the Flag workshop. This is going to be about, let's see, it's 10:30. We're going to go till about 12:30-ish. So a couple hours. We're going to talk about CTFs in general. We're going to talk about some different types of CTF challenges, and I'm going to talk about this specific CTF. So this is not exactly the same as other CTFs that you might see, regularly. And I'll talk about why that is when we get there. And then I'm going to point you to some resources that you can use. If you're a student who wants to participate in more CTFs, there's lots of opportunities for that. If you're an educator who wants to get your CTF students, if you want to get your students involved in CTFs, or you have a team, a cybersecurity club or team that you want to get involved in CTFs, I'm going to point to some resources that'll get you going down that road. You can host your own CTFs. There's just lots of different opportunities, and I'm going to point those out. And CTFs are getting more and more popular amongst high schools and colleges, and again amongst companies. So they're a good thing to at least know about if you're involved in cybersecurity education, or if you're a student who wants to go down the cybersecurity path. So we've turned off some things in the for this webinar. We've turned off your ability to unmute. And so if you have any questions or comments, I ask you to put them in the chat window. And we have some folks who are monitoring the chat. And if you have questions or comments, then just put them in the chat. And then at some point where it makes sense, our helpers will audibly ask me the question, or I'll try to come back to chat and take a look at it once in a while. So use the chat window. So we're going to start with a little bit of intro and prep. Did some of that already. We'll do overview of Capture the Flag. So what are CTFs all about? This might be a review for a lot of you, so I'll sort of keep that brief. I'm going to talk about some general problem-solving tips. How to solve CTF challenges from a high level. So how to approach different kinds of challenges, and we'll talk about some software tools that you can use. I'll focus a lot on kind of some of the entry-level software tools, but I'll also point out some of the more advanced tools that you can use if you want to get into more challenging, more difficult CTF challenges. And that'll be this CTF challenges by type. We'll go sort of down the different kinds of challenges and how to approach them. And then we're going to talk about where you can find other CTFs that you can play, and how you can even host your own CTF for your club or team or class or whatever. So this is the list of topics, and again, a couple of hours. We're going to take a couple of breaks along the way, because I'm going to talk about some challenge types, and then I'm going to ask you to solve a challenge, and we'll do a little poll. The polls will be around these challenges, and so you'll have an opportunity to quickly try to solve a challenge, and then answer the poll, and then we'll take a look at the results and see how folks did. In fact, we have a poll to start us out. I'm sort of interested in people's CTF participation before this. That'll sort of help me gauge as I go through the workshop. So I'm going to ask Maureen, can you release the first poll?
Sure. There we go.
And if you would just quickly let us know if you've completed in a couple of CTFs, or if you've done lots of CTFs, that's helpful to know. If you've never done it before, that's helpful too. Okay, this is good. So we've got lots of experience. Maybe that's Ahmed. I see Ahmed on our list here. All right, we'll give the poll just another about 20 seconds. And then we're going to close it. So if you're going to answer the poll, go ahead and jump in there and let us know your CTF experience. And you guys monitoring the chat?
Yes.
Okay.
Ahmed has medium experience.
Come on, Ahmed. We know you're a ninja. If you already registered for the CTF, you don't have to do that again. Yeah. Okay.
Do you want to end the poll, or would you like me to do it?
Yeah. I'll do it. I'll do it. Sorry.
Okay.
End. Okay. All right. So I'm going to share the results here. So the results are We have one person with lots of experience, a handful of folks who've computed in a few CTFs, and then we have a pretty good group that's never done a CTF before. So that's a great mix for this workshop. I think you should all get something out of this discussion. Okay, so all right, so let me move on here. All right, again, some notes. So for this workshop, most challenges will be solvable just using a web browser. Some will require some additional software applications. So I'm gonna point out some software applications that would be useful to solve some of these different kinds of CTF challenges. And when we get there, we'll get there. But a lot of these you can just use a web browser to solve. And so don't be discouraged. Don't feel like you have to install a bunch of software on your laptop, or if you're using a Chromebook, you can solve most of these CTF challenges using a Chromebook. You don't have to install any special software for most of the challenges. Again, use the chat window to ask questions. The CTF is available here, nccaw2020.ctf.virginiacyberrange.org. And we have a Slack channel. So if you haven't already registered for the CTF, and if you haven't done the Slack channel, then go ahead and take a screenshot of this slide. And I'm going to move on to it here in about 5 seconds. And this will help you get set up. The CTF is actually going to go live at 11 a.m., but it's going to run until, it's going to run for the whole week. So it runs till noon on Friday, and then we'll announce some winners on Friday afternoon. Okay, so what is Capture the Flag? So it's a cybersecurity competition, right? So most folks, hopefully people who are on the line, know that CTF is a cybersecurity competition. Can be individual or team-based. This particular CTF, we've made it an individual Capture the Flag competition. You can also have team-based CTFs, and those are fun too. Those are more fun when you can get people together in a room and sort of work together on stuff. And that we understand that's difficult right now. So we set this up as an individual competition. Sometimes they're in person, often they're remote. That's one of the great things about Capture the Flag is most of the challenges, most of the competitions are remote challenges. So it doesn't cost a lot of money for a club to get started up and to participate in CTFs on a regular basis, because you don't have to travel, right? So like, the sports teams have to travel, the speech and debate team has to travel most of the time to get to competitions. But for CTF competitions, you can almost always do them remotely. So that's a great benefit. There are various formats of CTFs. And so the one we're going to do this week, and the challenges that we're going to talk about today are what's called a Jeopardy style CTF. And Jeopardy style refers to the game show Jeopardy, where you have a series of questions, and the questions are in categories, and the questions have point values. And as the questions get more difficult, the point values increase. And so that's why it's called a Jeopardy style CTF. And I'll just mention there's sad news over the weekend. People may have heard this, that the longtime host of Jeopardy, Alex Trebek, passed away over the weekend from cancer, and so sad to hear that. But that's where this term Jeopardy style CTF comes from. There are also these attack defend CTFs, and so these are different. There are sort of different kinds of attack defend CTFs. So some of them are really sort of force on force, where teams are put into networks, and the teams are defending their own network while they're trying to capture flags in other networks. Some attack defend CTFs are simply where you are required to harden and defend a network, and then you have some red team that might attack the network. So there's, for example, there's the CCDC competition, National CCDC competition. That's the Collegiate Cyber Defense competition, where you harden a network and then you defend it against a red team that tries to gain unauthorized access to the network. These are really fun, these attack defense CTFs, but they're generally, more advanced students are involved in those because they require that you have sufficient experience administering Windows and Linux systems, and you've already learned how to secure those systems. So pretty, lots of college students involved in those kinds of attack defend CTFs. We have a cybersecurity club at Virginia Tech, and the cybersecurity club participates in those kinds of competitions. These are college students that have had quite a bit of experience. But really, the best CTFs for getting to learn about sort of entry-level cybersecurity topics and advance your skills are these Jeopardy style CTFs. And these are hosted by college CTF teams. So lots of great CTFs hosted by college teams. The Virginia Tech Cybersecurity Club hosts an annual Capture the Flag competition in the spring. Lots of colleges and universities in Virginia host regular CTFs. And then across the country. So I'll show you as we get towards the end here, I'm going to show you how to find those CTFs. And again, there's a CTF that you can participate in almost every weekend. So lots of great opportunities for doing this stuff. Excuse me. These competitions are also hosted by companies and DoD and other government agencies who are looking for talent, right? So these are companies that put on these competitions, and then the winners might get some company related internship, or there's an annual event that's hosted by Facebook that whereby students are able to the students who do particularly well are able to attend the Black Hat conference in Las Vegas, courtesy of Facebook. And the students are sort of given backstage sort of access, and they get to meet with some senior Facebook folks. And so that's an example of Capture the Flag hosted by companies and other organizations that these organizations are sort of getting to understand that Capture the Flag is a great way to identify students who are not only capable of solving these different cybersecurity challenges, but also sort of passionate about it. And it's a great way to potentially find a job sometime in the future. Okay, so why CTFs? Great way to spark interest. Again, if you're an educator and you want to get your students interested or see who might be interested in cybersecurity as a potential career field, then CTFs is a great way to do it. A well-designed CTF caters to a wide range of ability levels. So the CTF you're going to see today has lots of very entry-level challenges, and then the difficulty level of the challenges sort of increases as you solve more, and so that's going to cater to the intermediate to the advanced students, right? So you want to cater to a wide range of ability levels because you want everybody to be engaged and enjoy it. And it really encourages independent learning. That you're almost always going to have to learn something new to solve even an individual CTF challenge, and that's intended, right? They're sort of intended to teach you some new skill or force you to learn some new skill. And you'll see in this CTF that some of the challenges sort of direct you on that path. So they sort of describe, okay, this is the kind of challenge this is. Here's some tools that might be helpful to solve the challenge. And then as the challenges get more difficult, there's less of that sort of prodding, and it's more of you having to figure it out for yourself. And so these are great to encourage independent learning. And a well-designed CTF also has you exercise some real-world skills, and that's particularly true with this CTF because it's really focused on the cybersecurity career areas. And so we have challenges in here that align with these job roles, and so you're seeing some of the real-world skills that some of these professions require in order to be successful. CTFs can be used for team building events. So we've hosted CTFs for for a variety of different team building organizations who want to sort of have game day, and they have a CTF. They're great for skills assessment. So I know teachers who will have a CTF ready, and they will teach a block on maybe networking. And then at the end of that block, they'll have CTF day where the students can solve some networking challenges. They can also be used to teach basic skills in problem solving, right? So you can provide your students with a CTF, before you start some block, and let them see what they can do, and then you teach them the new stuff, and then you do a CTF at the end and see what they've learned. And so there's lots of cool reasons for doing CTF. I love this picture. Just to give you a little quick story. This picture is from a classroom at Virginia Tech at about 8 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. And these students are all here for a capture the flag competition, right? So they're in a classroom at Virginia Tech doing a thing that looks like schoolwork, but they're all there on a completely voluntary basis. In fact, these students come from 3 states, and there's about 130 students at this thing, and they're just there to participate for the day in a capture the flag competition. And the prizes are pretty wimpy, but really the grand prize is having bragging rights to say, hey, we won the Virginia Tech Cybersecurity Summit CTF this year, and the clubs will put that on their web pages or whatever. So pretty cool to see a bunch of students this interested in the topic, early on a Saturday morning. So this is just an example of a Jeopardy style CTF board. And as I mentioned, you have categories and point levels, right? And so as the point levels, as the point values get more, get higher, the challenges get more difficult. Okay, so these are some common types of challenges that you'll see. These are not the categories for this particular CTF, and I'll show you the categories for this particular CTF here in a minute. But these are some different types of challenges that you'll see, and these are often the categories that often the categories will line up with these challenge types, but not in this case. So one category is general cybersecurity knowledge, and this can be just sort of terms related to cybersecurity, or different types of network security devices. These kinds of questions can be about cybersecurity related careers or jobs. So it's just sort of general knowledge about cybersecurity. And you'll see various category names for this type of challenge. Sometimes they're labeled as trivia challenges. Sometimes you'll see a lot of this stuff in reconnaissance challenges. So it just sort of depends on who created the CTF. Cryptography challenges are those related to crypto systems or character encodings, right? So a lot of cryptography challenges are really not in cryptography at all. They're really character encodings, and I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to that specific type of challenge. Web challenges are pretty straightforward. They're either having you find a flag hidden in the HTML perhaps of a web page, or there may be a vulnerable web application, and the web challenge is designed to basically teach you how to do, how to set up a web application incorrectly, right? So if you can figure out how to break somebody else's web application, then that should tell you, hey, don't set up your web application like this in the future. You sort of learn how to do it wrong so that you can do it right. You learn what the pitfalls are. Reconnaissance challenges just have you sort of follow a trail of hints to find a flag. Networking challenges have you analyzing captured network traffic usually. So you'll have PCAP files, packet capture files, and you'll have to answer some question related to that packet capture file. Or some networking challenges actually have you analyzing real live network traffic, which is pretty cool. That's usually difficult to do in a sort of an asynchronous CTF environment where people are located all over the place. To have them analyzing real, no kidding, network traffic. But once in a while you see that, and those are pretty interesting challenges. Forensics challenges, these are cool. These have you analyzing various digital artifacts in order to answer some question. And digital forensics is a whole career field in cybersecurity. There's lots of digital forensics associated with criminal investigations. So so crimes nowadays have pretty significant digital footprint. So you have people carrying their device, and that the location of that device can be determined in order to help prove that somebody was at a particular place at a particular time, or people use their devices to send messages back and forth to co-conspirators. So lots of digital forensics around criminal investigations. And then there's also digital forensics around just analyzing potential penetrations of your own network, right? So I have a suspicion that my network has been compromised, and I can do digital forensics to try to discover what happened and why. And then the last category here is reverse engineering or binary exploitation. These are generally very advanced challenges. These reverse engineering challenges, these are, you're not going to see any reverse engineering challenges in this CTF. I don't think. I think we, these reverse engineering challenges generally require pretty significant programming experience, probably some experience with assembly level programming, probably some experience with debugging and reverse engineering, and a bunch of things that probably are really geared towards college students or professionals. And so I don't think we included any reverse engineering challenges in this CTF. But that's a type of challenge that you'll see in lots of advanced capture the flag competitions. Okay, so that's just a quick overview of the different challenge types. So now let's talk about the categories for this particular CTF. So again, this CTF is focused on the NIST workforce framework, right? So we have lots of questions around the workforce framework itself and the different job roles. And then we have questions related to the different things that you might do as part of these different work roles. So you're going to see challenges in these following categories, and these are the NIST workforce framework categories. There's the securely provision category. So this is, how do I set up a secure network in order to make it defensible against some potential attacker? Operate and maintain. So how do I maintain that network over time, make sure it continues to be secure? How do I operate it in a secure way so that it's least likely to get compromised? Oversee and govern. So these are more management roles. So who manages cybersecurity in an organization? It might be a chief information security officer, and then how does the governance work? That's very important cybersecurity career field. It's generally less technical and more sort of policy oriented. There's the protect and defend role. These are the people who are sort of on the front lines of network security. They're the ones who, people like network analysts who are on a daily basis, watching the state of different security devices. They see things like the intrusion detection system throw alerts and say, hey, we think that there's potential malicious traffic in this portion of the network. And then those protect and defend, those network analysts, network defenders, incident responders, they're going to go try to figure out what happened and why. You have the analyze category. These are people who generally they might go back after the fact. So after something happened, they're going to be analyzing network traffic. They're going to be analyzing hard drives to see what kinds of things might have happened in the network. You have collect and operate. This is if you think of like military intelligence, collecting information about adversaries, for example, this sort of gets out ahead of just defending my network. The collect and operate category is sort of centered around people who sort of start thinking about, okay, who are my potential adversaries? What are the kinds of attacks that they might attempt on my network? And how do I focus on those specific kinds of attacks to make sure that I can prioritize my defense based on who might be coming after me. And then there's the investigate category. Obviously, the investigate category and the analyze category are very closely linked. And investigations are what I was talking about, digital forensics, right? So you're analyzing hard drive images, you're analyzing network traffic, you're taking that information and compiling it along with other corroborating information to try to identify who did some specific thing related to a network device. So the challenges in this CTF, they're across these categories, and the challenges include questions related to each career category or associated job roles, right? So we're going to ask you some questions related to the career categories themselves or different knowledge, skills, and abilities in those various job roles. And then there are also technical questions that are related to jobs within the categories, right? So for example, in the investigate category, you might see some forensics things. Oops, forensics. Boy, my pen's acting really weird. And in the analyze category, maybe you'll see networking challenges, or it's in the securely provision category, you might see cryptography questions, because that's some of the security around building the network has a strong foundation in cryptography. So you'll see technical questions embedded to these different framework categories that are related to jobs within those categories that somebody might do as a cybersecurity professional. And I mentioned earlier, you should check back throughout the week to see if there's any additional challenges. So if you've solved sort of all the challenges or most of the challenges, or you feel like you've sort of hit a wall and you've solved everything that you can solve, don't give up on the CTF. Come back later in the week. We may add some additional stuff throughout the week, or go back and take some more time looking at some of those challenges that you didn't solve before, or even you might even get on the Slack channel and say, hey, I've been working really hard to try to solve this particular challenge and I just can't figure it out. Can you give me a hint? And we'll look at the solve rate, and if it seems like lots of people are having difficulty with that particular challenge, then maybe we'll throw some hints out on the Slack channel. So please come back and check out the CTF throughout the week. And so this is what you're going to see. I guess this is what you'll see now if you log in, because the CTF just started at 11. These are the categories. So I mentioned that they're the NIST career categories: analyze, collect and operate, investigate, operate, maintain, oversee and govern, protect and defend, securely provision. And if you click, let me see if I can bring up the CTF here. Okay, so here it is. Actually, this is the live CTF. And if I go to challenges, as I click through the different categories, I get challenges, and the challenges have increasing point values, and the point values are higher as the challenges get more difficult. Again, some of these challenges are simply asking questions about different work roles or jobs they're in, or knowledge, skills, and abilities related to those particular work roles. And some of the challenges are technical challenges related to the different categories that I mentioned earlier. Okay, back to my slides. So here's some general tips as you start approaching some of these different challenges. First of all, I've mentioned a couple of times, right, that point values indicate difficulty level. So those are not a hard and fast sort of, it's sometimes you'll solve a 20-point challenge really easily, but you'll struggle with a 5-point challenge, just because it depends on your particular background and what you know and what you can find as you search on the web for potential tools to solve a challenge. So don't just assume that a low point value challenge is going to be super easy, because it may be super easy for some people, but not for you. But but point values are a good indicator of the difficulty level. I should also mention that the point values are assigned by the creator of the CTF challenge. And just like a higher point value for you might be easier than a lower point value question, sometimes CTF challenge writers, they think they put together something that's really difficult, but maybe there's some path to a solution that they didn't envision, and that makes the challenge easier than it is, right? So I would encourage you to, don't say, well, I'm a beginner, I'm not going to try that 40-point challenge because I know I can't do it. I would encourage you, go ahead and open it up and take a look at it and give it a few minutes, right? Because it may be that there's an easy solution that the person who created the challenge and who assigned the point values just didn't know about. And so that could be an easy 40 points for you. The challenge name is almost always a hint, right? So the name of the challenge is important. So if you're just completely stuck, if there's some technical challenge, you're just completely stuck, it helps sometimes to Google the category along with the challenge name. And the same is true with the descriptions, right? The description of a challenge is very often a hint. So sometimes it's helpful to Google the category along with keywords in the challenge, in the description of the challenge, because that may point you in a particular direction. Sometimes on some of the CTF challenges, sometimes half the challenge is just figuring out what the challenge is, right? You might just have a challenge where there's absolutely no description. You just have a file. And you're scratching your head thinking, okay, I have this file. I don't know, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with it. So what do you do then? Well, go back to the challenge name. The challenge name is generally going to just give some sort of a hint as to what you're supposed to do with it. So keep those things in mind. Is there a file? So if there's a file as part of the challenge, so some of these challenges have artifacts. We call them artifacts. It's either a file that you can download or it's a link that you can click on and take you somewhere else. And so the challenges that have files, the file extension, well, so first of all, the file name might be a hint, right? File name might be a hint. The file extension might be misleading. And so like, for example, you get to a challenge, you'll click on the file and it downloads, file name.xls. And what do you think when you download file name.xls? You think, oh, that's an Excel spreadsheet, right? You double click on the file and you get an error message. The Windows says, that this file cannot be recognized. And it won't open the file in Excel, right? It's trying to open the file in Excel, but it won't work. Okay, so what do you do then? You think, oh, gee, I'm out of luck here with this challenge. Well, it may be the case that the file is not an Excel file at all, but it's a Word document, or it might be a text file, or some other extension. And when the Microsoft operating system, Windows 10 or whatever, when it sees a file extension, Windows assumes that file extension is going to be correct, and it's going to try to open that file with a particular piece of software. And that's just not always the case. So, there are these things called magic numbers, and magic numbers. They're also called file signatures. So if you were Googling to find out more information about this, if you Googled file magic numbers or file signatures, then you would find some information about how to identify a particular type of file, not based on the file extension, but based on information inside the file itself. So at the very beginning of just about every file on a Windows operating system or a Linux operating system or a Mac operating system, the first bit of the file actually identifies what kind of a file it is, and that's referred to as magic numbers. It's sort of colloquialism. That's why I put quotes around it. But those are also called file signatures, and so those help you identify what kind of a file it is. And if you're still having trouble, or you just can't, get any useful information out of the file, then open it in Notepad. You can open just about any kind of a file in a text editor, and it might look garbled. If it's a program, if it's an executable program, it's going to look garbled, but you're going to see some text in there. Almost any kind of a file is going to have some sort of readable text in it. And if you open that, PDF file in Notepad, or if you open that Word document in Notepad, or that JPEG image, you may be able to read things about that file that you wouldn't see if you open it up in the proper in the proper program that the file is intended to be read in. So this is a good technique. Open the file in a text editor to see what you can see. And the point there is to show you that there's way more than meets the eye, right? In an image file, there's all kinds of information stored in an image file besides the image itself, and a lot of that information is interesting and relevant for cybersecurity investigators and for others. Search for strings in the file, right? So there's a couple of different applications that you can use to find strings in a file. There's a Linux application called Strings. You can run strings on a Mac or a Linux system at the command line. There's also a strings application for Windows. So you can install strings in a Windows system, and you can use it to find strings in a file. And it's going to find, when I say strings, a string is a data type in programming where it's multiple characters in a row, right? So that's considered a string. And so on this example on the right hand side here, for example, we ran strings against a program called Strings, and this is an executable program on a Linux system. But you'll see that there's all these sequences of letters. And you can read this stuff, and then if you look here, there's this flag embedded in the string. It's a series of characters, and so if you were to open this with a text editor, you'd be able to find that same thing. You just have to search because what Strings does is it filters out all the what would look like garbage in a text editor and just gives you the things that look like they're sequences of characters. Okay, so files are interesting, and there's lots of different ways to investigate, to pull apart files without just opening it in the basic tool that you think is intended for it to be opened in. Okay, so so are there any names mentioned in the challenge? If there are names mentioned in the challenge, the name is almost always meaningful, right? And when I say names, I mean a person's name or a location name. Those names are going to be relevant, right? So if there's a name in a challenge and you don't know who that, you don't know who that person is, you haven't heard that name before, of course you have to Google the name to figure out. It may be somebody who defined some specific network protocol, and then you say, okay, well, this networking challenge must be related to this particular protocol. Or it might be a mathematician who created some encryption algorithm, and then again you say, okay, this challenge must be related to that encryption algorithm. It's also important to remember when you input the challenge, your answer has to match exactly or very closely to what the challenge creator put in as the answer to the challenge, right? The CTF system is not going to be able to parse your misspelled word, for example. It's going to just, if you spell a word incorrectly, it's going to ignore your solution. So if you're putting in an answer and you think that you're right and it's not taking the answer, then you should first of all make sure your answer is spelled correctly. You might try to do it, capitalize or don't capitalize the response. A good CTF challenge is going to be able to predict whether you're going to use capitalization or not. It's going to be able to do, apply something like a regular expression to try to identify, various forms of the inputted answer. But that's not always the case. And, it just depends on who created the challenge and what they're able to predict in terms of what you might input as the answer. And so you might have to try different forms of the answer, or you might have to come to the conclusion that the thing that you're putting in as the answer is just not the answer, and you got to go somewhere else. And if you just keep struggling with a challenge and you cannot figure it out, then again, go to the Slack channel and put in a question in the Slack channel, and somebody will answer. They'll either say, sorry, that's not it. Or we might even say, hey, that's a better answer to the challenge than we put in. We're going to add that as a potential solution. And so, and then if we do that, we'll let people know. Okay, general tips. Those are the general tips. All right, let's start talking about some specific type. So I guess there's the questions. There's some good back and forth on the chat here. Okay. So if there's a question in the chat that Maureen or Vicky can't answer, then they'll chime in and ask me the question. But other than that, I'm going to sort of veer away from the chat. Okay, so I'm going to talk about some different challenge types, and I'm going to give you some opportunities to answer some challenges. So we have some polls that we're going to throw up here in the next few minutes. And these are also opportunities to take a break, right? So I'm going to give you a challenge. I'm going to give you a few minutes to try to solve it. And then we'll throw up a poll, and you can answer or not, but we'd like to get some people answering just to see how we did. We're not keeping track, so if you answer wrong, it's not a big deal. And then we'll move on to the next category of challenge. And we've got an hour and 20 minutes or so left, so plenty of time to go through some of these different categories. It might not even take an hour and 20 minutes to do what we're going to do today. Okay, so challenge type. So this is the first type I'm going to talk about is general cybersecurity knowledge, right? So you might see in a CTF, you might see this as the trivia category, or not, right? It might, these kinds of challenges might just be embedded in other categories. Or what we like to do, so at the Virginia Cyber Range and the US Cyber Range, we host lots of capture the flag competitions. And we often like to have a category that is a non-standard category, right? So, we'll ask a series of challenges about, it might be like sort of Star Wars trivia, or, Discworld trivia if you're a Discworld person. It's often a category that's maybe not super tightly integrated with cybersecurity, but it's the kinds of it's related to the kinds of things that cybersecurity people often like science fiction or fantasy or B movies or whatever. So you'll see lots of different kinds of trivia or cybersecurity knowledge challenges, and lots of different names for them. These are sometimes around basic user awareness. So they'll ask things like the CIA triad, or ask things about risk, or exploits, or the basic sort of cybersecurity terminology. Yeah, so basic terminology related to cybersecurity. You'll often see questions about network security devices and software. And then there's also, this particular CTF has lots of career-related questions. So for cybersecurity careers, that information about the job roles, a lot of that is in the NIST workforce framework. And I think I have a slide in here, so I won't write anymore on the screen. I think there's a slide, and I'll point to the slide when we get to it. So cybersecurity career information, and there's some resources that I'm going to point to that'll get you, the kinds of answers that you might have to fill in for some of those questions, or some of them are just, some of them are, you just have to do some searching on the web to find answers. And I mentioned, some of these, cyber knowledge, they might even be non-cybersecurity topics, just to sort of keep things interesting and fun. So if you see something that's totally out of left field, don't be surprised. The answers might not all be very, super specific to cybersecurity. Okay, so this is the kind of thing that you might see, right? You'll see some of the basic terminology, like the cyber principles, the CIA triad, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. You might see questions related to like malware, right? So it's helpful to know the different kinds of malware, and this is what you might learn in a cybersecurity class, particularly sort of an early cybersecurity class, or different kinds of malware are, there's lots of information on these things on the internet that you can find. So you'll often see questions along these lines. So you should be able to differentiate, between ransomware and spyware, for example. So there's the NIST Workforce Framework, National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education Workforce Framework, of course, part of NIST, National Institute for Science and Technology. And the NIST Workforce Framework has a list of tasks, statements, and work roles that help describe cybersecurity work. And the NIST Workforce Framework also has this very nice list of knowledge, skills, and abilities related to various cybersecurity jobs. And so, questions related to the cybersecurity career field, you might find in documents related to the Workforce Framework. And the Workforce Framework itself is in NIST Special Publication 800-181. So if you were to Google that, you'd find a PDF that has the details of the Workforce Framework, and it has job role descriptions, it has KSAs, et cetera. So if you just Google NIST Workforce Framework, there's a website. So this is the website from NIST. So it's a NIST.gov website. And it's the Workforce Framework Resource Center. I don't put the URL here because the URL is kind of long and ugly, and it's it's not easy to type. But if you just search on the web for NICE Workforce Framework, you're gonna find that NIST.gov website that takes you to this, the NICE Workforce Framework Resource Center. This has got a lot of great information. It's got the career categories, right? So these are our CTF challenge categories: provision, operate, maintain, oversee, govern, protect, defend, analyze, collect, operate, investigate. There's also a link here to that document that I just mentioned, NIST Special Publication 800.171. That's the document that describes the job categories and work roles and the KSAs around the Workforce Framework. So lots of good information at this website if you haven't been there before. This is another great website for information about cybersecurity jobs. It's called cyberseek.org. So this one is an easy URL, so I put the easy URL here for you to go to, www.cyberseek.org. This website is a collaboration between NIST and a company called Glassdoor, which is it's a job search site. And then CompTIA is also involved in CyberSeek. So CompTIA is a company that does cybersecurity training and certification. Anyway, those two companies, along with the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education, put together this really cool website that I'm going to go here because I want to. Oh, whoops. Maybe I'm not going to go there. Okay, I'm not going to go to the website. The cyberseek.org website has a couple of things. First of all, it has a state-by-state listing of open cybersecurity jobs. So it gives you information about each state. How many open jobs there are, what are the different categories of work roles that those open jobs are in. So if you're thinking about, hey, I live in Virginia and I'm looking to maybe be a cybersecurity person, what are my opportunities in Virginia or North Dakota or California or whatever. I'll tell you, in every state, there are more jobs than there are people filling cybersecurity jobs. According to cyberseek.org, there are 500,000 open cybersecurity jobs in the country. And right now, about 50,000 open cybersecurity jobs just in the state of Virginia. And it varies by state, obviously, but lots of opportunities in cybersecurity right now. So there's cool information state by state about what opportunities there are. There's description of these, and there's very good descriptions of these different kinds of cybersecurity jobs. And there's even career pathways. So if you're thinking, hey, when my goal in a career is to be a chief information security officer. What are the different paths to get me that I can get there, right? What might I start as in cybersecurity to get me eventually to be a chief information security officer? So there are these career pathways that take you from Intel analyst to security architect to forensics investigator to whatever, up to CISO or CIO or I don't know. I think it's just a really interesting tool to start thinking about what the different careers could be and the pathways to get to things that I think are interesting. Okay, so let's start with a cyber knowledge question, and I'm going to give folks a minute or two to do a little research, and then we're going to throw up a poll, and I'm going to ask you to answer the poll. And if you need to go fill up your water bottle or take a break for a minute or two, then this is a great opportunity for that. So so here's the question. This is the challenge. What type of malware encrypts your data and demands a ransom? Usually in cryptocurrency, right? So it's a type of malware that encrypts your data, demands a ransom. And don't put the answer in the chat, because we're gonna in about a minute we're gonna put up a poll so you can answer. The poll is set up as a multiple choice thing. The challenge, of course, if it was in a CTF, that wouldn't be multiple choice. It would be you'd have to put in an answer. So I'm not going to put up the poll right away, because I want you to have I don't want you to see what the options are. I want you to go find the answer yourself. But here in a minute, we're going to put up the poll, and then I'm going to ask you to answer the poll, and then we'll talk about the answer, and then we'll move on to a different category of challenges. So take about a minute, take a breather, stretch, stand up, reach for the ceiling. Let's take a look at the CTF real quick, see how things are going. Scoreboard. Oh, all right. We got some people taking off. Ooh, somebody's already got 80 points. Wow. All right. So the CTF is live, and we're off to the races. So some of these challenges, sample challenges you might see in the actual CTF, and I'm not going to highlight those. You'll have to find them when you find them, but some of the things we talk about might help you in the actual CTF. Okay, so let's go ahead and put up a poll. Maureen, can you throw the poll up? All right. What type of malware encrypts data and demands a ransom, usually in cryptocurrency, for the decryption key? Okay, wow, all right. Okay, looking good. Lots of good answers here. Awesome, brilliant. Okay, we'll give you about 20 seconds more. Go ahead and answer the poll. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, end the poll. I'm going to end the poll, and I'm going to share. Okay, well, they're shared. All right, thanks, Maureen. Okay, ransomware, right. What type of malware encrypts your data and demands a ransom? Ransomware, for sure. Crypto miner is a different thing. So we did have one person answer crypto miner. That's a good stab at it. A crypto miner is actually malware that mines cryptocurrency on behalf of somebody else. So they'll have a, you might install some program that has malicious intent in it, and that malware is what it's going to do is it's going to do like Bitcoin mining on your computer, but it doesn't put the Bitcoin into your account. It puts it into the malware author's account. That's what crypto miner is. So that's a different kind of malware. Ransomware is where it encrypts your data, demands a ransom for the encryption key. That's a very popular type of malware these days. And I was going to say something else. I forgot what it was. Oh, it's certainly something that is being perpetrated against places like hospitals, right? So a hospital is a place where they can't afford to have their network shut down for very long because people's lives are at stake. And so, hospitals tend to pay ransomware people just because, it's less of a security discussion than it is a lives discussion. So, so lots of malicious people out there doing ransomware these days. Okay, let's move on here. Stop. Whoops, and close that. I think I closed it. Did I close it? Okay, ransomware. All right, so next type of challenge we're going to talk about is crypto challenges. So cryptography. So in cryptography challenges, you're often provided with some encoded message and some hint as to the encoding, right? So you provided some encoded message and a hint as to the encoding. Most cryptography challenges are like that. They're not all like that. Some of them point you to a web service or a website that, so it's not necessarily you're just given some blob of data. But for most crypto challenges, at least certainly, I think the ones you'll see in this CTF, you're provided with some encoded blob, some series of characters or numbers or whatever, and some hint as to the encoding. Many of these challenges are not encryption at all, right? So cryptography, it makes these challenges sound very mysterious and difficult. The fact is that a lot of crypto challenges are not encryption, but they're actually encodings. They're actually character encodings. And so you might ask yourself, why are people creating these challenges around character encodings and they call it an encryption challenge? And I don't have a good answer for that. I'll just tell you that I've been doing CTFs for a lot of years, and from the very early days, the idea was to sort of ease people into encryption. And so the very easiest of cryptography challenges are generally character encodings, some direct translation from characters to numbers or to hex values or something. And then the next level is simple monoalphabetic ciphers. So character encodings are things like ASCII. So ASCII is an acronym, American Standard. I don't remember what it is. It's a way to represent characters in numeric form or in hexadecimal. And if you're gonna represent a character on a computer where all data is represented as bits, then you have to be able to have some numeric relationship between characters and numbers, and that's called ASCII. ASCII is the original, or is maybe not the original, but it's an early character encoding. And now you see lots of a newer character encoding called Unicode. ASCII is a great encoding scheme, but it's only 7 bits, so it's limited in the number of characters that you can encode. And so it includes the English alphabet and Arabic numbers and etc. But it doesn't represent all the different alphabets worldwide or all the different numeric representations or whatever. So Unicode is a more robust. It's got larger. It's got more bits per character, so you can encode lots of different stuff. So sometimes you'll see data encoded in Unicode instead of ASCII. There's also some ways to translate digital data into ASCII or into character representations, and some of the tools used to do that kind of stuff are base 64 or base 32 or UU encode. This is just a very basic sampling of these different character encodings. There's lots of different character encodings out there, and used for different things in cybersecurity or in computing. And, you might ask, why do I care about character encodings? What's the point of having those kinds of CTF challenges? Well, again, it comes back to, if you're investigating, maybe you're doing digital forensics on some hard drive, or there's some messages being passed back and forth, and there's data encoded in those messages, and you don't know what it is. Some of these basic character encodings are used to encode data for transmission over the network. And as a cybersecurity person, it's important that you recognize what those different character encodings are. So like when you see it, you'll say, oh, that looks like it might be ASCII, or that looks like it might be base 64. And then that takes you down the path to decoding that message to see what it is, right? So character encodings are very important to a cybersecurity person in order to be successful in analyzing data. Might even be more important than cryptography itself, which we'll talk about next. So this is the first sort of subset of crypto challenges. Lots of them aren't even crypto. That's a closely guarded secret. Don't tell anybody. The next level you'll see are simple monoalphabetic ciphers. So these are not modern crypto that you see used to encrypt traffic between you and your bank on the web, for example. These are simple monoalphabetic ciphers, and this takes us, it's sort of a history lesson in cryptography. And again, why is if monoalphabetic ciphers aren't how we encode data, or are not how we encrypt data these days, why do we teach it? Why do we have these in CTF competitions? Well, they're important because modern crypto systems are based on techniques used in these early crypto systems. So if you have a firm grounding of these early cryptographic systems, then you can later on learn the more sophisticated systems that we use now. So things like a rotation cipher, where you simply rotate the alphabet. That's kind of the most basic of monoalphabetic cipher. So monoalphabetic means I'm trading one character for another, and the one for one is if I have the same key, then the one for one is always the same. So a Caesar cipher is a simple rotation cipher. I just rotate the alphabet by some number of characters. A popular rotation cipher is ROT13, rotation 13. That's where I rotate the alphabet by 13 characters. And the reason ROT13 is a useful, widely used rotation cipher is because the encryption and the decryption use exactly the same algorithm. So for a lot of ciphers, the encryption and the decryption can be different, because like if I encrypt something using a rotation of 3, then I have to reverse that rotation on the decryption side. So the encryption step is different than the decryption step. ROT13 always uses the same, it's 13, the alphabet is 26 characters. So if you rotate it 13, then rotate it 13 again, you get back to your original letter. So ROT cipher, rotational cipher. And then the next level up is a substitution cipher. So this is where you're not just rotating the alphabet, but you're replacing a character with some other character in the alphabet. And these are the kinds of ciphers that you'll see like in the newspaper. If you ever look at the puzzle page, well, I don't know if you ever get a newspaper. If you ever look at the puzzle page on the newspaper, I'm a puzzle page guy, so I do the daily crossword puzzle, and on that same puzzle page in the Roanoke Times, there's a crypto quote, and it's a substitution cipher, right? So it's one character replaced for another, and the thing that makes the crypto quote solvable by chumps like me is that you can clearly see the words, so it'll break up the words, but there'll be spaces in between, and there'll be punctuation and apostrophes and whatever, and that makes a substitution cipher much easier to solve, because that if it's a single character word, then it's either an I or an A, or if it's a 3-letter word, then it's there's only a handful of possibilities. It could be a the, could be an and. If it's a 2-letter word, same thing. If there's an apostrophe with a single character afterwards, then that's usually going to be a T or an S. So some easy substitution cipher challenges will have words broken up by spaces and punctuation. That makes them a little bit easier to solve. Some more complicated substitution ciphers, and the way that substitution ciphers were really used in like back in World War II, for example, is there's no spaces, right? It was just character, and then when you decrypted it, then obviously you'd see the words and you'd put the spaces in where they needed to be. But substitution ciphers you'll definitely see. These can be easily solved without the key using this technique called frequency analysis, and especially for longer bodies of text. You do frequency analysis. We know, for example, that the most widely used characters in the English language are things like E and then T and then S, and then there's a certain frequency, so frequency analysis is super helpful. As challenges get more complicated in the cryptography field, we're still not up to modern crypto, but there are things like polyalphabetic ciphers, right? So polyalphabetic means that one character is going to be represented by different characters in the encrypted message or encoded message. So polyalphabetic ciphers use usually a key phrase, and then the shift in the key phrase is going to be the number of shifts for each individual character, and so they get a little bit more complicated. But you'll see things like a Vignere cipher, or a Playfair cipher, or Beaufort, or AutoKey. These are all polyalphabetic ciphers. And on the next slide, I'm going to show you some resources for solving these kinds of things. There are also transposition ciphers. So these are ciphers where you're not replacing a character with another character. You are, these ciphers use a thing called substitution. Okay, and there's this other sort of class of relatively simple ciphers that use transposition, right? And it's right in the name, transposition ciphers. And when I say transposition, what I mean is, here's one of them. This is a rail fence cipher. So rail fence cipher is right here. And so it looks like a fence, right? And I have this word, the United Kingdom. And if I were sending this secret message to my partner, I would send T and D G. So I would send it crosswise like this, H U I E, and then I would dot. And then I would the key. What I would tell him is that this is a 3-rail fence cipher, and if the person, if you look at this and if you know that it's a 3-rail fence cipher, then this is easy to turn back into the original message, right? So that's character transposition. So I'm not replacing characters with other characters. I'm transposing the characters. I'm moving them around. Here's another one, columnar transposition. So in the columnar transposition, I have here I have a sequence of numbers, right? And I have a message here, a Midsummer Night's Dream. If you read it across like this, a Midsummer Night's Dream, and the rail fence, the columnar transposition. What I do is I now take this and I change the order of these. So I put these in a different order. So I say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I have, under 1, I have SIE, then under 2, I have IRD, and then I can send the message, this way, with the different, and the words are transposed, so in their different order, right? So it's the same basic characters, but they're in a different order. So, and then sometimes you see so here's a double columnar transposition. This is where I have a secret keyword and I do one columnar, I do it once and then I do it again, and then I get the output. And then in order to undo this, I have to essentially do this in reverse, right? So So substitution and transposition are these two sort of basic building blocks of cryptography. And modern cryptography, much of modern cryptography is built particularly symmetric cryptography is built on substitution and transposition. So like the AES, the Advanced Encryption Standard, which is the gold standard for symmetric encryption, basically uses substitution and transposition in order to encrypt data. Instead of doing it on the character by character level, it's doing it on the bit by bit level, but it's the same idea. I'm either replacing bits by other bits or I'm transposing bits. And then the reverse is basically I have to do the same thing backwards and I get back to the original thing. So there's some great resources out there. There's cryptoit.net. This website has some solvers. It will try to it will use some well-known algorithms to essentially brute force solve some of these different kinds of crypto systems. So that's a great website for CTF people as you're trying to solve substitution or transposition ciphers. Cryptoit.net. And then there's the Khan Academy. The Khan Academy has some great introductory cryptography material. So I point to it here, khanacademy.org. Or if you just do a web search for Khan Academy crypto, you'll find these great resources. There's some other good websites. There's a website called ASCII2HEX.com, ASCII2HEX.com. This one has a bunch of different character encodings. So it's one web page where you can put in different types of encodings and convert them, to ASCII or to other encodings. There's website called rot13.com. This one lets you put in different possible rotations of the alphabet and will help you solve rotation ciphers. There's this one called Boxcentric, which does some automated code breaking. Decode.fr. When you go to this webpage, you might have to switch it to English language mode. It's a French website, but you can click the English language button if you end up on the French version. This has just a ton of different crypto systems, and it lets you. It's got a ton of great options, ton of different crypto systems. It'll do some brute force decryption itself. Lots of good resources here. So if you're doing crypto stuff, then these are great places to go. All right, I got a sample crypto challenge, and we're going to do the same thing, right? I'm going to give you the crypto, and I'm going to give you a few minutes to solve this, a couple of minutes to solve this. Then we're going to throw up a poll. So here's the crypto, and I'll tell you, this is a mono-alphabetic cipher. This is a pretty straightforward. This is not an encoding. This is mono-alphabetic cipher. FVZCYR FUVSGPVCURE. So take a minute or two, take 2 minutes to think about this. And I'll even give you a hint. And we're going to have a poll here in about 2 minutes, and we'll see how folks did with this mono-alphabetic cipher. And if you need to run to the restroom, now's a good time because we're going to take about 2 minutes here. All right, how we doing? We got some solves out there. So Ed asks a good question in the chat. He asks if the presentation will be made available separately or only through the video recording. So we will hang the video out on our out on the website, and we'll also hang a link to the slides out there. And we'll do that. This will get recorded. This is getting recorded, so it takes a couple hours after it ends for the recording to be ready, and then we'll have to do a little bit of editing. But we'll hang the video and the slides out on the website. So if you go to virginiacyberrange.org, bottom right corner, there's an events page. Click there, you'll find it. Okay, Maureen, you want to throw up the poll? All right, here we go. Who actually solved it? Okay, looking good. Looking good. Looks like some people assume I reused this from a different CTF challenge. I'll tell you that I did not reuse this. Okay, so I'm going to wrap it. I'm going to wrap up the polling so we can move on. We got about 35 minutes left. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to end it. Boom. All right. So simple shift cipher. Yeah. So that was the right answer. Simple shift cipher. The answer letter B, and yeah, so letter B there, I saw, I conquered. That's an answer to a different CTF challenge that we made available previously. And then toga party at 11, that's a good one. That's not the right answer, but that would have been my second choice for the flag, because that one has the right number of characters, right? So this one has the right number of characters. This one has the right number of characters. The other two, they're too long. Of course, you didn't know that until we put the poll up. So anyway, nice work. So we're getting the hang of it, looks like. There's one or two more polls we're going to do. Oops, simple shift cipher. Okay. All right. So the next class of challenges are web challenges. And you'll see various different kinds of web challenges, and it really depends on the sort of the level of sophistication that there is expected from the creators of the CTF challenges. So so easy web challenges rely on basic understanding of how HTML, or a basic understanding of, let me start again. Easy challenges rely on a basic understanding of HTML and how websites work. And I think this is a cool type of challenge because I think lots of students use the web on a regular basis, or they use apps on a regular basis. So they use their phone or their computer or whatever, their Chromebook to go to Google and find information, or go to Facebook, and well, they probably don't use Facebook anymore, but they go to social media sites, they go to websites. And what they don't understand as users of this technology is that they don't understand sort of the back end side of it, right? So the data they see on their website, for example, it's really just code that's being interpreted by their browser, and their browser is displaying information based on what's interpreted. And so in my picture here, here's Google's web page, but this is how the web page is transmitted over the internet, right? So it looks like this almost looks like an image with a text box in it. The thing that's transmitted over the network is this encoding of this, right? And it makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. So if you think about, you want you want the output to be appropriately sized, for example. And so if you pull up Google on your web browser, regardless of the resolution of your web browser or your screen or your phone or whatever, the page is generally going to look the same. It's going to have Google right in the middle. It's going to have a search bar, right under that, and there's this consistent look and feel across devices, across web browsers, across whatever. And so the reason that is because the different systems are able to interpret the encoding and or the markup language, and they're able to translate it into what should look right on that particular device. And it's it's useful for users of the internet to understand how that works. It's also super important for people who are developers of web applications, for example, to understand how people might abuse things like, here's a place on this web page where you can type stuff in, and you're going to type stuff into that window, and then on the back end, the web server is going to do something based on that stuff that you typed in. And if you don't understand, how you secure, or how you make that web server secure, regardless of what somebody types in, then you can have some serious problems. So understanding the interaction between a web server and a web client, a browser, is pretty important for any security person. So easy challenges rely on just some basic understanding of how websites work. And for those, the approaches are very straightforward, right? You can view the page source. You can open the developer panel. Developer panel will show you, in modern web browsers, like on Chrome, it's going to show you it's going to give you the page source, but it's also going to have information about scripts that run on the page and a bunch of other information. You might examine the network traffic back and forth between the client and the server. That's sometimes really interesting, looking at the actual network traffic. And one way to do that is to use a tool such as Wireshark. So Wireshark is a protocol analyzer. It's a tool that you can use to observe network traffic. We may get to looking at Wireshark before we finish up here. But examining the network traffic sometimes can be fruitful in a web challenge. You can curl the page. This is interesting. So if you're using a Mac or a Linux system, you can use this software application called Curl. Might be able to use it in Windows too. And it's gonna display the actual HTML. So if I were on a Linux command line and I said curl www.google.com, I'm going to get the HTML, but it's going to be on my command line. So it's going to be in a terminal window, and I could actually see the HTML, and that can be useful if you're doing a web challenge. Robots.txt. That's I'd ask you to Google that if you don't know what that is. That's a way to hide portions of your website from responsible search engines. Sometimes CTF challenges are hidden using robots.txt. Directory traversal attack. This is interesting. This is where somebody might type in google.com and then they'll go // and then something like /Etsy/password. So in a web server, when you type in a URL and then you have slashes and paths to things. These are actual paths on the file system of the host device, and in the old days, some people didn't secure their websites properly, and it was possible for a malicious actor to actually sort of drive up and down the file system, right? So if you're a user of the command line, you know that .. // that's going to move you up. So if the file system has directories and then subdirectories, then you do a .. that's going to move you up a level. And the way websites work on the server is like on a Linux server, the web server, the web pages are often in a folder, for example, called HTML. Here's my folder called HTML. And then under that, I might have, different folders. And so these paths are pointing to folders and then files within those folders, but the dots will bring me up in the file system. And so that's a thing that is, you can misconfigure a website like this even to this day. If you don't configure things properly, you can have these directory traversal vulnerabilities, which can allow people to do malicious things by driving around your file system on your web server. That's very dangerous because they can certainly find things that they shouldn't be able to find in there. Okay. So this is what a web page. This is sort of a very super basic HTML web page. So this is HTML is a text file, and so here's my file, and this might be a file called might be called index.html, or it might be called home.html. And this is all markup, and the page is rendered based on the markup language, right? So us old people remember the days when you used to create websites by typing them into a text editor. Use Notepad or something to create your web pages. So the HTML starts with the HTML tag and it ends with a closed HTML tag. And if you open any web page to this day, it's going to have an open tag HTML, a closed tag HTML. And then there's going to be a header section with open head, close head. Whoops, I have a typo. I have a head tag, then I have the page title in here, and then close head. And then I have the body, right? The body of the web page. And so the title is the thing that shows in the address bar or on the tab. It's not the thing that shows at the top of the page. The stuff in the header section is sort of metadata about the page itself. So you might have scripts embedded in there or other metadata. The title, for example, that's metadata that doesn't show up in the web page. That shows up on the browser bar. The body, this is where the actual rendered page shows up, right? So in the body, you can have comments. So there's different programming languages have different ways to represent comments. Comments are things that do not appear on the page itself. So here's a comment. It's represented in HTML with a open tag and then a exclamation dash dash, and then you put whatever you want in the comment block, and then the comment block is ended with two dashes and a whatever, a greater than sign, a close tag sign. So anything in between those two things is a comment. So none of that's going to show up on the web page itself. You have large header. So you have H1 large header. You have lists of stuff. So here's an unordered list. You can have references to other web pages. So here's a ref to npr.org. And so this NRP, whoops, God, I got all kinds of typos on my thing here. NPR. This would show up on the page, but it'd be a link. And then you have a closed body tag. So this is a very super simple HTML web page, but this is a valid HTML web page that would render properly in any modern web browser. Most web pages are obviously way more complicated than this. Tags use a basic format. They have open, you have the name of the tag, and then there's a greater than on one side and a less than on the other side. And then oftentimes there's a closed tag. So for example, body and then closed body, HTML, close HTML. Web pages are in the early days of the web pages were all stored on a server as HTML files. Most web pages these days are auto-generated. So we'll talk more about that in a minute. But in the old days, and still is true today, lots of web pages are stored as HTML files on a web server. Simple pages might just use HTML and nothing else. There might be some embedded images or links or whatever, but simple pages might not have any scripts in them. Scripts are what makes web pages really complicated these days. Most modern web pages, not all, most modern web pages use JavaScript or some other scripting language that give you lots more functionality. So JavaScript is a programming language that lets you do lots of sophisticated things. The cyber range is built using JavaScript. The CTF infrastructure that you'll be using for the CTF is built using JavaScript. You can view a page's source code in your browser. So in Chrome, for example, go to the 3-dot menu and go to more tools and developer tools. And we'll take a look at that in here in just a minute. Okay, so this is basic HTML pages. And so this is the early model of the web, right? You had your web browser, and when you typed in a URL, so this particular web page is WC3. So somebody had a web browser, and they type in http wc3.org, and what happens is your web browser packages this request, sends it over the network as an HTTP GET request. The web server is going to receive that request. It's going to look in its file system for a page called index.html, because that's the default file name in most modern web servers for when you don't put in the name of the file itself. So you could have wc3.org.index.html, but people never do that anymore. They just put in the URL, and index.html is the default page that's going to get searched for in the file system. And then the web server, assuming it finds that file there, it's going to return it over the network to the web browser, and now now that page is going to get rendered. So the early model of the World Wide Web was simply a file system lookup. So the web server would accept a request, it would look in its file system, look for a particular file, then turn around, it would send that file back. And the file, again, is simply HTML. So you have a HTML open tag, there's the head, there's the body, close body, close HTML. Okay, that's the early days, back in the late 90s when the web first rolled out in the early 90s. And this is how the web worked for the first many years of it. Now, most websites are much more complicated, right? So the modern World Wide Web model works more like this. This is even still a pretty simplified picture, but here's how this is a simplified picture of how lots of modern web pages work. Starts with a GET request. So the first part of this is similarly straightforward to the old days. You might send a GET request, and the file system is, in this case, the person went to google.com, right? So google.com. And the web server found the home page for google.com in the file system, sends it back, gets sent back to the web browser, it gets rendered on the page. Okay, now this is where things get interesting. Now somebody can type in a search term in that window there. And that search term gets encapsulated in what's called a HTTP post request. It's just a different kind of a communication with the web server, but basically it's going to tell the web server, hey, here's this search, here's the thing that the person typed in. I want you to go to the database and find relevant data based on that particular thing typed in, and then return it. And then so the database is going to, there's going to be this database search, and then there's going to be a HTML template that's going to get pulled out of a different part of the file system. And then that whole thing gets packaged together using some kind of language like PHP or ASP, which is active server pages. It could be JavaScript. It could be, it's some scripting language that's going to package this, the response from the database and some files out of the file system, package it all together, and then send it back to the client. And so now the client gets information based on that web search. So this is a much more complicated. This is the way most of the web works today. Very few web pages are, if you go to Amazon.com, for example, to go shopping, that web page that you see that has information like, hey, here's the results of your most recent stuff that you searched for when you were on Amazon.com. or it's going to show deals of the day or whatever. That's all dynamically generated, pulled out of a web, out of a database, and presented to you for your viewing pleasure. And it's much different model than the early web. The why this is relevant though is because it's much more complicated, right? So it's hard for somebody to abuse this thing, right? When the web server simply finds a file in the file system and returns it to you, it's very hard to abuse this. With this, it's way easier to abuse because it's hard to predict, for example, what somebody could type into that little window. And if anytime the web server is going to do something on your behalf based on stuff that you can type in to a window on a web page, that opens up all kinds of crazy possibilities where you could do things like cross-site scripting or SQL injection or command injection or cross-site request forgery or fill in the blank. There's all kinds of malicious things that you could do in that sort of scenario, and lots of those things were sort of not predicted in the early days, right? So people started creating these complicated web toolkits where you could do all this stuff, but they didn't think, somebody might type in some native SQL. They might realize that my website is just doing an SQL lookup, but they might type in native SQL. People just didn't think of that in the early days. And and even now that we fully understand the dangers of things like SQL injection and cross-site scripting, et cetera, still tons of websites are vulnerable to this stuff for lots of reasons. And so understanding how to build these applications in a secure way is important. And that's why there's lots of CTF challenges around, websites that have been implemented in an insecure way to make the students understand, hey, this is broken. This is not the way that you should do this. So in more complicated CTF challenges, you're going to have to leverage some of these kinds of this understanding of these more sophisticated websites and how they work in order to solve challenges. And frankly, a lot of that is fully Googleable, right? So you can, so if you, in a CTF challenge, you're often going to have hints that are going to lead you down a particular kind of vulnerability in the web infrastructure. And you do some Googling, you find some information about how you might identify the specific vulnerability, then you can solve some of these. So you'd be surprised what you can come up with if you put your energy into it. Okay, so here's a web challenge, and this should be an easy one. So we'll give you about a minute, and then we'll throw up the poll. So what is the secret message? There's a secret message hidden near the close body tag on this website. So there's a secret message hidden near the close body tag at secretsquirrel.com. And here's a hint: view the page source. We're going to take 1 minute, and then we're going to put up a poll. So go to secretsquirrel.com, find the secret message. Take another 30 seconds or so. Another 10 seconds. Okay, so Maureen, why don't you go ahead and put up the poll, and let's see if I can. Oh, look at that! Everybody's all over this one. Let me go here. I'm gonna go check it out. Let's go to secretsquirrel.com. Here's secretsquirrel.com. And I'm going to go to more tools, developer tools, or you can hit F12 on your Windows machine. So here's my web page. Here's the open. So I open up the developer tools, and up at the top right corner here, I get the native HTML. And if I go down here near the close body tag, I can see here's the secret message near the close body tag, and it's squiddly diddly, right? So it's not the close HTML tag. It's the secret message hidden near the body tag, close body tag. So end polling and share the results. Okay, there's the results. So great job on that one. Any questions on how I found that? Okay. Squiddly diddly. All right. One or two categories left here. Maybe one category. We'll see how we go. Oh, nah, yeah, okay. No, we got a little bit of time. Okay, reconnaissance challenges. These are general problem solving. Often not much cyber experience needed. So reconnaissance challenges, they might even be hard to distinguish between a reconnaissance challenge and something sort of like a trivia challenge or something. So reconnaissance. The reason that reconnaissance is a CTF category is because when somebody is doing either a penetration test, or if they're trying to hack your website, or they're trying to hack your organization, reconnaissance is generally step one in the process. And so reconnaissance is all about finding a whole bunch of information about the target organization. Again, whether you're a white hat doing a penetration test, or whether you're a bad guy doing a malicious attempt to attack somebody's infrastructure, starts with reconnaissance. You want to get as much information as you can about the organization. And so it's an important enough topic that the early CTF creators created CTF challenges that were all about reconnaissance. And in the early days, a lot of them truly were reconnaissance challenges. So they would have you finding information about some actual company or organization. And as time went on, I think people got a little bit concerned about potentially people going too far, right? They didn't want people to actually target those organizations or make them feel like they're being targeted. And so the reconnaissance challenges generally kind of backed off a little bit, and they started to look more and more sort of like trivia challenges. But usually there's some sort of problem solving sequence that you have to do. Sometimes you have to have lots of cyber experience, sometimes not so much. So if you're a beginner CTF challenge person and you're getting into a challenge that has these traditional categories like networking and web and crypto, and you want to sort of get your feet wet, the place where I would start is with reconnaissance challenges, because a lot of these, again, don't require a lot of true cyber experience. They usually require competitors to follow a trail of clues to reach the final flag, right? Useful tools, there's all kinds of useful tools. Google is probably your most useful tool, honestly, for just about any CTF challenge. Google, if you're an expert at searching the web, then that's going to take you a long way. There's a couple of other things I point to here on this page, on this slide. There's this thing called the Internet Wayback Machine, archive.org. And so archive.org, what it does is it has it catalogs old versions of web pages. Archive.org. And really cool. It's got this thing, the Wayback Machine. And so if I were to put in here, for example, vt.edu, Virginia Tech, I'm putting in Virginia Tech's webpage, vt.edu. And it's gonna, okay, so it gives me this calendar. And so this is the cataloged vt.edu webpage dating back, right now it's 2020, dating back to 1997. And you'll see it's much sparser in the old days. So only, so I'll click back here to 1997. So it's much sparser, right? So the Virginia Tech webpage was captured, it looks like 3 times back in 1997. Nowadays, it's capturing the webpage like just about every day. It's taking a snapshot, and it archives it, right? Okay, so we can see here, I can actually click on a day, and I can see what the Virginia Tech webpage looked like back on June 19th, 1997. Okay, so it's waiting. It's got to dig through its database, and it's got to probably, this web page is probably compressed in some deeply buried archive, so it doesn't pull it up immediately. It takes a few minutes, but here it is. This is really cool, I think. This is the Virginia Tech website from, it was whatever day that was. It was back in December 12th, 1998. So this is a Virginia Tech webpage from December 12th, 1998. And this is sort of interesting for historical purposes, right? I can go back and look at the old version of the web. Obviously, the Virginia Tech webpage from today is if I go to vt.edu, it's something completely different. The reason this is relevant, but these pages are archived too. It's a lot more difficult to archive the pages these days because, again, they're much more complicated. Back in 1998, this is mostly a static web page. Anyway, the reason this is relevant is if you're doing reconnaissance on an organization, then it might be useful to know. Who was the company president back in 5 years ago or whatever, because you might be able to socially engineer the person who's now the secretary. Hey, is Bob Jones there? Oh, Bob's not here anymore. Oh, I was really hoping to get a hold of Bob Jones because whatever. And I mean, if you can find old information about an organization, then you might be able to do some social engineering, or you might be able to discover information about their network that maybe they don't want people to know anymore. So there's lots of juicy data in some of these, stored, some of these old web pages that could be useful if you're doing reconnaissance on an organization. And the same is true for if you're doing a reconnaissance web challenge. Whois lookups are interesting. Whois.icann.org. This lets you discover things like, I should say this used to be able to give you information about like who is the administrator for a particular organization, for a particular organization's website. And ICANN would give you the person's name and email address, whatever contact information they used when they registered the domain, that would be available through a Whois lookup. And actually, most of that information is obscured now because of privacy laws. So you had this trend. So early on, whoever registered the website, that information was shown on the Whois, when you did a Whois lookup. And then later, some of these domain registering companies would charge you a fee to hide that information. And so then if somebody had a question, and the reason that the administrator information was provided, particularly in the early days of the internet, was because if your web page was broken, then somebody could do a Whois lookup and they could call you up and say, hey, your web page is broken. And back when there were only a few hundred web pages on the internet, then that was really useful, and you could actually call somebody. If your thing was broke, somebody would call you and say, hey, fix your web page. Back in sort of the early friendly days of the internet. So being able to actually contact the administrator for a particular organization was super helpful. And so again, later on, these domain registration companies would charge you a fee to obscure that information. So basically, they would list their own contact information instead of your administrator, And then if your web page is broken, the person could call whoever your domain admin, whoever you registered the domain with. So it could be GoDaddy or it could be different companies. And then that company would turn around and call you and say, hey, your web page is broken, right? So that provided this level of indirection. It's obscured some information from would-be attackers. Nowadays, there's with recent privacy laws, particularly in Europe, GDPR laws, that information is almost always obscured. So the domain registrar, I think now almost none of them actually make that information about your specific domain admin available anymore. And so they'll just, again, they'll do this thing where they point to themselves. And so if somebody's web page is broken, you have to call GoDaddy, and they'll turn around and call the person who registered the domain. But you still can get some information out of this. You can get information like IP address blocks. You can get information about just who the organization is. And even if you can't get down to a specific person, you can get potentially information about the organization who registered the domain, et cetera. So still can get some useful information here. Shodan is an interesting web page. This is a web page that shows searches. So it's a lookup. It's a search engine, but it's not a search engine for web pages. It's a search engine for other kinds of devices on the network. And there's all kinds of other devices that might be on a network, like industrial control systems or printers or webcams or whatever. And Shodan will find that, will help you find that kind of stuff. And that can be interesting from a reconnaissance perspective and potentially from a CTF perspective. Here's a quick recon challenge. And I'm actually we're not going to do the poll this time. I'm going to go past this quickly. Here's the challenge. It's a number, and then the question is what's next? And I'm going to give you the answer here. This is the answer. So what I encourage you to do is either write these down or take a screenshot of this, and you can reverse engineer this later and figure out why that's the correct answer for this particular challenge. So I'm going to give you about 5 seconds here to take a screenshot, and you can go sort of, this is an exercise that you can do on your own time later. Okay. Last thing I'm going to talk about is networking challenges. I'll be very brief here. So I mentioned that early on, the CTF challenges in this CTF, most of them you can solve using the web. Others you will need some other additional software to solve. And I would point towards some free and open source software that you can use to solve those kinds of challenges. Networking challenges require that you, at least in this CTF, they're going to require that you analyze some packet captures, right? So there's going to be a PCAP file, something.pcap, and those are packet captures. And so you're going to answer questions related to network traffic. And sometimes you have to carve images or files from the streams of packets. There's all kinds of really interesting things that you can do with a packet capture file as you get into more difficult networking challenges. The basic tool that you use is Wireshark. I would point to Wireshark for any, sort of newbie to intermediate CTF participant. Wireshark is the tool of choice. There's other more sophisticated tools, things like TCP dump or WinDump or ngrep. Generally, those are used by, those are things that are used by network administrators and cybersecurity administrators. So I've done a fair amount of network administration, and I'm a TCP dump person. So this is a command line tool in Linux. There's a similar tool called WinDump in Windows. This is a great tool for troubleshooting network problems and for analyzing network packets, but it's a professional's tool. Wireshark can be used by anybody. It's a very easy to use graphical user interface. Looks like this. So you open up Wireshark and you see the individual packets, and you get this, there's this nice filter bar so you can filter packets. There's this very robust filtering language. And so you can filter and find very specific packets. In this case, we're doing a search that says IP.destination equals 10.3.0.20 and the TCP port equals 80. So that is, those are web requests, right? TCP port 80 is HTTP. That's web. And so we're looking for traffic going to and from this web server 10.3.0.20. So great tool. I'm not going to talk a lot about it right now because we're running out of time, but there's at least one sort of very entry level networking challenge that you'll find in the challenges, and it sort of walks you through how to, where to find and install Wireshark, and it's got a very straightforward entry level networking challenge. And if you don't look at any other networking challenges, I would take a look at that one. It's either called IP to Ethernet or Ethernet to IP. I don't remember which. I think it's Ethernet to IP. Anyway, it's a very straightforward networking challenge, but it has you use Wireshark to solve it, and it's a great introduction to Wireshark. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that. Okay, and now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna jump ahead here because I want to wrap things up. Okay, I'm just gonna take about 5 more minutes because we're running out of time, and the NIST conference and expo gets started up again at 1 p.m. So if you're involved in the NIST conference, I want to make sure that people can get to that. So I told you that I would point you to some competitions that you can participate in, and I list a few of them here, and then I'm going to show you how to find lots more than this, right? So there's some great high school competitions out there. Probably the best one of the best ones is this thing called Pico CTF. This is hosted by Carnegie Mellon, and Carnegie Mellon has probably the best CTF team, the best CTF club in the world. They're called the PPP, which is an acronym. The acronym itself is irrelevant, but these guys and gals are elite CTF players. They play all kinds of CTFs throughout the year. Historically, I mean, they may not be like in first place. I'll show you where you can see what, where they sit in the sort of the ranking of CTF teams. But just, I mean, if you're looking for a long-standing CTF team that's been successful over the last 10 or 15 or 20 years, Carnegie Mellon's CTF team is it. And they work out of this organization, the Sci Lab, which is cybersecurity lab. It's a research lab at Carnegie Mellon, and so they put together this annual capture the flag competition. It's really intended for high school students, and it's a collaboration between their cybersecurity team and their video game program, right? So Carnegie Mellon has a video game program. So those two groups came together, created this thing called Pico CTF. They run it almost every year. And it's sort of a combination video game CTF. It's very cool. And I would encourage you to take a look at it. There's an annual competition that runs for some time period, usually in the fall, I think. But it's, they released last year's version, so it's playable right now. You can go play the whatever the last version of Pico CTF was. It's up and available for you to play at your convenience. It's a cool CTF. Others are Easy CTF, HS CTF, high school CTF, the first CTF by high schoolers for high schoolers. I think that one's still active. RU Secure CTF. This is a good one run by Radford University. This has been around for 8 or 9 years, I think. They have 3 rounds. So they have a preliminary round, which is active right now until later this month, I think. Then there's a qualifying round in which people compete to qualify for the in-person round, which is the final round that'll happen in March or April. And so they have some prizes. It has I mean, I like the fact that it's got this qualifier, then the in-person finals. And if you go to, if you Google "Are you secure CTF," you'll find it. And their preliminary round again is open and available right now. Cyber Patriot is a different kind of a CTF. It's not a Jeopardy style CTF like we've been talking about here, but it's more of a network defense kind of a competition. That's a great opportunity for high school students. And if you're not aware of that, if you're an educator or a high school student who's interested in this kind of stuff, then please talk to your cybersecurity teacher about it, or one of your educators who might be willing to put a team together. Those are high school competitions. College and professional competitions, there's a bunch of these too. There's the Seesaw CTF. There's a Virginia Cyber Fusion. This is a Virginia specific capture the flag competition held every year. There's the DEF CON CTF. That's kind of the gold standard of CTFs, right? The DEF CON CTF winner is sort of the champion of the world, held annually during the annual DEF CON conference. The format of that changes from year to year. There's this, I mentioned this earlier, the CCDC, Collegiate Cyber Defense Competition. This is an annual intercollegiate competition that is a network defense competition. And the CCDC champs for the last 3 years actually are University of Virginia. And in fact, I think Ahmed Ibrahim is on the line here. He has been deeply involved in the UVA effort around CCDC for the last several years. And this team is really good. And for information about all upcoming and past CTFs, I'm going to highly encourage you to take a look at a website called ctftime.org. ctftime.org. You should write that down. If you have any interest in doing more CTFs, you should write this down. Here's what ctftime.org does for you. It's a central repository of CTF info. So it's got a couple of very important components of this. Maybe the most important is on the lower left here, there's this section called upcoming events. And this lists upcoming CTFs. And there's almost always, like almost every weekend, there's a capture the flag competition. At least, I don't know, I'm not sure how much the landscape has changed in current circumstances. So I know some CTFs got canceled because of the pandemic, and those will come online again sometime soon. Pre-pandemic, almost every weekend there'd be a CTF competition that you could participate in. Some of them are designed for high schoolers or for college students. Some are designed for professionals. There's a wide range of them, but you can find them in upcoming events. And the event, if you click on the event, it's going to give details like how to participate, who the participants can be, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It contains this worldwide leaderboard. So this is interesting. So this is that team from Carnegie Mellon, PPP. When I took this screenshot, I don't know how old this screenshot is, but they were in second place worldwide on ctftime.org. Again, you'll almost always see those guys at the top or near the top of this leaderboard. Calendar of upcoming CTFs. Here's another super useful bit of information. There's past events, right? The past events, there's this archive of old CTFs going back to 2011. So you can find old CTF challenges to practice on. And this is what, so I taught the cybersecurity program at West Point for several years, and I was the faculty advisor for the cybersecurity club there. And they used these old CTF challenges to essentially train the team. So these students, they got together a couple times a week, and they practiced for future capture the flag competitions. And the way they practiced was they pulled up old CTF challenges out of CTF time. And there's not only challenges, but there's write-ups, there's solutions, right? So you can go find old CTF challenges and you can hand them out to your cybersecurity club or your class or whatever, and they can hack on these challenges. And, the way our club did it was, somebody would solve the challenge and then they would describe to the group how they solved it. And then, then everybody learns from that whole experience, right? But if nobody in the team could solve it, then they would go find the solution, the write-up for the solution. So in the end, they're gonna learn how to solve this challenge. And the thing about CTF challenges, as you do it more and more, you learn some of the tips and tricks, and you learn how to recognize different kinds of challenges and different kinds of vulnerabilities in websites, and etc. And you know, it's just by repetition. It's like anything else. The more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. So ctftime.org. I highly recommend this website. Lots of great information here on CTFs. You can host your own CTF. So some free CTF frameworks that you can use. CTFD is maybe the most popular CTF, open source CTF platform out there. And you can download it from GitHub, and you can install it in a Docker container or on a server yourself. It takes literally a few minutes to install it and make it available. And it's a great CTF framework. Facebook CTF is another free framework that you can download and you can host locally. You can pay somebody to host your CTF infrastructure for you. So CTFD, they have a paid hosting version, so they'll host your platform for you, starting at $50 a month. Meta CTF is a group of students and former students out of University of Virginia. They have a company called Meta CTF. They do some really great competitions and workshops. And so metactf.com, they'll host your CTF for you for a nominal fee. And then the US Cyber Range Cloud CTF, if you go to cloudctf.com, this is not quite available yet, but you'll be able to have hosted CTF platforms or hosted competitions, and more information about that is going to be coming very soon. And I'm completely out of time. I meant to finish this about 10 or 15 minutes early, but this happens to me a lot where I push it right up against the end. So thanks for joining me today. My name is David Raymond. I'm the director of the Virginia Cyber Range. This has been my pleasure to spend this morning with everybody.